This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe. My name is Matteo Rizzi. I'm the executive producer of the show, and today is show 161. Today we talk about impact as an economic driver. This is part of our Breaking Carbon series. And incredibly, we are here like all Portuguese speaking, 4 Portuguese nationalities, like plus me. But only one of them, one of the guests is actually in Portugal, I think. So let's get to know them. Let's start by the far remote, very good friend, Katia. Katia Davim. I'll let her introduce herself, but she is connecting from Australia, is the 10 p.m. in night. Katia, very warm welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thank you, Matteo. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, wherever you are. I'm dialing in from the beautiful land of Sydney, where it's summertime, where I actually had the chance to have a swim this morning and make Matteo very jealous. My name is Katia. I'm the founder of the Social Good Summit Australia, which I have the chance probably to talk a little bit more about the project. But in a nutshell, is a conference that brings together, a mind-like people to tell stories about social impact and how can we all collectively make the world a better place. I'm also a partner at KPMG here in Australia, and I lecture at UNSW, which is one of the main universities here in Australia, around the topic of creating shared value, which is how can a business be a force for good. So a variety of kind of a career portfolio, very much linked to the social impact space.
Great. It's incredible because this is actually the first like a professional talk I'm having with Katia, although I know her for like over 10 years and I'm a friend of the family for, probably 30 years. But you will see that this is not at all a recommended sort of, guest input. It's, you really have your place here as you will see. Rita also a newcomer to Breaking Banks Europe. Welcome.
Hi, Matteo. Hi, everyone. I'm Rita. I'm in Lisbon, and I'm a partner at Maze. Maze is an impact investing company. We basically developed tools that allow entrepreneurs or entities to create and implement creative solutions and innovative approaches to tackle the biggest social and environmental challenges of our times. So we work with the public sector, corporates, entrepreneurs, investors, and we basically work amongst these different stakeholders in this maze. That hence why the name of our company. And basically that's what we do at the European level mainly. So we run a VC fund. We have some acceleration programs. We developed more consultancy-based or innovation-based kind of work with corporates and work with the public sector on outcomes-based projects. And my personal background has been on impact for more than 10 years. Before Maze, I was working in consultancy with nonprofits, and Maze has been the main chunk of my professional career. I'm very proud to say that, and also very fortunate for it.
Thank you, Rita. And now Nuno and I met a couple of weeks ago during the Visa Innovation Program in Madrid, where he presented GoParity. And, I was actually, very impressed by his story and his personal motivation. So, Nuno, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thanks a lot, Matteo, and hi, everyone. By now, I'm expecting Matteo to also be already an investor in GoParity.
I tried. I swear I tried, but I think my profile has been validated yesterday, so I will soon be.
It's probably because of people with public exposure. You had to go through a more thorough KYC. I'm one of the co-founders of GoParity. I'm an environmental engineer by training. Before becoming an entrepreneur, I worked in the European Parliament in a large utility company. Then started my entrepreneurial journey, created a solar power company, created a renewable energy cooperative. And GoParity is actually my third company, which has started, it was created in 2017, started in 2018. And in a nutshell, what we do is allow people and companies to lend money to sustainable projects a bit all over the world. So by now we have funded, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about that later on, but we have funded more than 200 projects that contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Rita has known us for several years now, almost since we started, because we were on the second batch of MAZE, of the MAZE acceleration program, even before it was called MAZE. And I had not had the pleasure to meet Katia yet.
That's great. That's great. Okay, guys, let's start with more of a rather personal question or a personal story question, which is the following. When we talk about impact entrepreneurs or impact initiative, each one has his or her own motivation or like a personal story or personal angle of what impact actually means. I can actually start because many of you might know if you have a look at my LinkedIn profile that we founded something called timepledge.org. And Time Pledge is a platform that coaches African entrepreneurs for free. It's a not-for-profit. There is no economic component of it. And it's simply a give-back platform for speakers that go and speak at different conferences to spend time with local entrepreneurs, helped by Time Pledge that organizes the logistics and help them, understand what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, how to pitch your startups, basic financial model, and so on. I like to think that this is an impact initiative because the impact that you produce or you create, to change or to help or to nurture or to inspire life of local entrepreneurs is, sometimes is really fundamentally changing the way they even see their lives, right? But this is one angle. There are so many, and I would like each one of you to understand, for each and every one of you to understand yours. Kata, you want to start, please?
Sure. So my angle was, I as I look at my personal journey and going back, a good 10 years, probably going through a kind of a sort of middle life crisis, where the question always popped in. We say, what are you doing for the world to make the world a better place? And I believe that we are all somehow, when we are teenagers, rebels and trying to make the world a better place. And then life gets along. We have families and affairs and children and all that stuff, and that question dissipates a bit. But the reality is, in myself, never went away. I was always present, and so the way I found that could create an impact in the world was very much, back in 2015 or 14, even when the world was in this turmoil. So these discussions around, the participation of business in society and the world, the contribution that we as individuals have in the world, they were very foreign in a way. But something was happening around the world. The United Nations was launching the Sustainable Development Goals, and this kind of revamped energy that actually that's post the Millennium Development Goals, which was somehow known in the world, but not to the extent that today the SDGs are known in the world. And in my domain, I thought there is a great opportunity to actually empower or use some sort of energy to make those SDGs quite known. And I think that is really important. Not known just in the forums of United Nations or kind of the power plays, but actually known to across the world and across all fabric of society. And that's kind of the way the Social Good Summit emerged, with the intent of truly bring stories together, and this truly through storytelling. Sometimes I look at myself: do I really make an impact, or what I just do is to convene those stories, and through aggregating all those stories that unites about 1,000 people at least every year to hear from people that are doing great stuff and great things for the world. So this way we can not only make those SDG famous, break the barriers and the cycles between the corporate world and the academia world and the governments and non-for-profits, because they tend to operate very much in silo. So the intent was to create a forum where all those fabrics of life will come together to debate. And back in 2015, this was very rare to happen, because you had your corporate forums, you had the non-for-profit forums, and they never used to come together. And then finally, the main goal was to inspire everybody, moms, dads, students, community organizers, you name it, and really demonstrate that every single human being in the world, all the 7-8 billion that we have the obligation somehow to make the world a better place, no matter where we are. And our personal decisions and choices and business and whatever we do with our lives, they can have a lens around social impacts. So that was the intent of creating, the Social Good Summit, and that's kind of my angle. Not necessarily being an advocate of anything, is somehow giving the power and the fuel of those stories to emerge, and through that inspire people to take action.
I just always love to hear these stories, like what motivates people and where people come from. So Katya, it's very great to hear your story. On my end, on my personal side of things, like I've always, since a very young age, since I was a child, I was in contact with voluntary work, with a lot of different realities than mine, right? So I was exposed to the inequalities of life, and to and to the big question of like, why are not everyone having access to the same rights and to the same kinds of services that in my case I was having. So that always really created a sense of privilege in a way, and with that privilege, the sense of responsibility and the duty to really give back, given that I was having the access to education, to health, to a democracy. So that basically grew with me. That's why I was always having a very active role on a social level. When I went to university, I was studying business, and on my holidays, in my free time, I kept doing voluntary work. I used to started being a consultant, applying it to a context of developing world, so more, again, non-profit kind of work, until a point where I realized, wait a second, I can merge these two things. So all the concepts that I'm learning in business school and the reality that I'm facing here, and perhaps I don't have to just have these two like separate lives and separate efforts and approaches. I can just join them, have a common mission in terms of what I'm doing. So apply the concepts and the kind of work that I like doing, which is business related, analytical kind of work, and at the same time really strive to create a positive impact in the context that I was working on. So it was quite progressive in that sense. Eventually, I learned the concept of social enterprises, which were companies that were tackling social and environmental problems as their main purpose of existence. For me, that was like, wow, when I learned about it back in 2011, I think. And with that came the concept of impact investing, the fact that you can invest with an impact focus. So your mission with your investment is really to try to change a reality for the positive, having this the solution of different social problems, the environmental concerns, and you can still profit with it because there are a lot of different business models that you can apply. So all of that for me was something that progressively became such exciting opportunities that it was eventually a very obvious choice of a career path. And then Maze showed up in my life at a very special moment, which was when I was finalizing my master's degree. And I immediately joined Maze. At the time, as Nuno was saying, we were called the Social Investment Lab. So there were 2 people in the team. It was really small. We're still very much of an experimental project trying to create the market in Portugal. And and eventually we just continued creating and testing, developing these new type of approaches that could bring market efficiency to this world, which before used to be called the third sector, in a way that had so many inefficiencies, and all of a sudden just became a whole new market. And today it's not yet super mainstream, but it's getting there with the sustainable development goals, with even the concept of ESG, which is a different thing than impact investing. But it's so basically this is my story, where I came from and what led me to Maze and to this context.
No, I'm expecting you now to tell the story that I loved about how a simple project basically led you to your to this idea. Please go ahead.
I wish I could say that, like Rita, I was very sensible to social issues since I was very small, but to be honest, and I think we need to be honest, I wasn't. So I was quite distant from all of this. I think maybe until I was in university. So obviously I studied environmental engineering due to environmental concerns, but never that much from the social perspective. I think what actually created in me this inner will to do something about what is wrong with the world was the experience with the European Parliament. And I used to say that in the European Parliament, it's like the best open university ever, because you work there and you have access to all kinds of information, all kinds of specialists, all kinds of conferences, panels, position papers, NGOs, business associations, and all of a sudden, a lot of problems are just, all the time planted in your face. And you feel like, and what I felt there was, wow, there's so much happening and people are trying to deal with that here, but I need to be hands-on. I need to be doing something for this, not contributing to the development of directives or regulations, whatever, that several years later might have some influence. I think I want to be on the terrain, not just planning on the very high level. And that's what made me leave the parliament. And I think I had the inner will to do something about it since the beginning. And what really drives me is the redistribution of power in its 2 meanings. So power as in money is power, and power as in energy and electricity. And this is what has always been a common line in my projects and in everything that I did. So the solar power company, the renewable energy cooperative, and now GoParity as also the democratization of impact finance, so that everyone can have access to profitable investment opportunities that also make an interest, like Rita said, which is of course possible. And I'm not sure what story you were talking about, Matteo. Is it the story about how GoParity started?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I'll just tell the short version. So after having lived a few years abroad, I came back to Portugal to work for this energy utility that was working in a large-scale hydroelectric plant, which felt like, okay, more renewables in Portugal, that's good. I moved back to Portugal, and I had to open a bank account. And when I lived in Spain and in Belgium, I used to have an account with an ethical bank. And then moving back to Portugal, it was mid 2009, so starting peak crisis, financial crisis. And I tried to look for an ethical bank, and of course, there was no ethical bank in Portugal. Actually, there still isn't. And so I had to end up opening an account with a bank account with another bank in Portugal. But this will to choose where my money is and what my money does stayed inside. So I had the idea to start a small solar power plant, and my stepmother has a small hotel in Tavira, which is the sunniest town in Portugal. And I talked to her and I said, would you rent the roof of your rural hotel so that me and a bunch of friends can invest in solar power? We install the panels in your roof, we sell electricity to the grid, and a percentage of whatever money we make, we will give it to you as if it was the monthly rent. And she said yes. So there's a good stepmother in this story. and then me and the friends I talked about this project to, we decided to invest, and we suddenly realized we didn't have money enough for the total capacity that we could install there. So we started talking to family and friends, asking, if we start a company, would you lend money to this company and we will pay you the fixed interest on that loan? And the business for us was, of course, total turnover for the equity part, and then we'd keep the spread between the cost of the loan and whatever money we made. And it was quite easy to get that money. And that's when I started to think, maybe there's a business model around this. Maybe this can become a company if it has scale. And then started researching into the world of renewable energy cooperatives, crowd lending platforms. And at that moment, it was 2011. There was no legal framework for crowd lending in Portugal back then. So I started GoParity, which is the renewable energy cooperative, started the solar power company. And only in 2017, when the framework for crowd lending came out in Portugal, I started GoParity with new founders, because my co-founders for the solar power company didn't want to leave that company. So I sold my share, found new co-founders, started GoParity in 2017, and started operating in 2018.
These are actually three beautiful stories of motivation with three different angles as we talked about. I want to just go on the super short break right now, and we come back with probably the biggest dichotomy in the impact space, which is the sustainability versus impact debate. Okay, so stay with us. We're going to come back after a short break, and that's a wrap.
At timepledge.org, we are building the largest free coaching and advisory platform for entrepreneurs by providing mentorship opportunities based on pledged time. Our network of seasoned industry experts acting as coaches is working for free, pledging their valued time to the next generation of entrepreneurs who will change everything. Our portfolio of sessions goes over every skill an entrepreneur needs to successfully launch his or her startup, from how to pitch and behave with investors to how to best market your idea online, or even how to best manage your team. We have the perfect sessions with the perfect mentors. Want to learn how to become the best entrepreneur you can be, or mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs in Africa and Asia? Please visit timepledge.org and let's get you started.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe, episode 161 on impact. We are here with Rita, Katia, and Nuno. You could sort of appreciate the beauty of the three stories that they shared. And let's now dive in a little bit into what I believe is the biggest challenge in the impact space, which is how do you ensure a proper, and I stress the word proper, sustainability model or a commercial model or a revenue model, and still focus on the impact you do. Let me give you an example. One of the investment funds I work for is a media network. Now they're called Flourish Ventures. And I want to shout out to them because Piero Media founded eBay 30 years ago. He decided to, when eBay floated, to devote all his fortune, which was $10 billion back at the time, into changing the world. So I want to almost to say that he invented the notion of patient capital, right? That is now sort of transported in these Flourish Ventures. They are the largest investor in Africa. So they are an impact investor, but their model is really what they call the double D, right? So they ensure the sustainability of the model, and yet thinking that they can sustain the capital by doing good. How, what's your vision on the right balance between sustainability and impact? And I want Rita to start with, because you are the investor here, right? So you must have a very strong opinion on what patient capital means.
Yes, we do. So patient capital is a really important concept because for certain, social environmental problems are so complex that a lot of the solutions that are required to be implemented will really need a lot of time, and patient capital brings this flexibility time-wise for results to appear. But patient capital in this sense, and I think we can just put it in this way, can be a way of doing impact investing and a way of approaching the market. Because in our case, we also do impact investing with a VC fund, and that's not so patient in that sense. It has exactly the same terms as a traditional VC fund in what concerns duration, for example, IRR, so financial returns expectations. And there, the premise is that there are also types of solutions that may scale quickly, and that's why it may be adequate to apply a model like VC to tackle also social and environmental challenges. So usually the companies that are invested through impact like VC funds tend to have a tech component so that they can be, they can scale very quickly. And the same can be for other models of investment that have other different requirements, taking into account the ability to pay of their, customers, different business models that can be arranged. So other types of funding models that take into consideration the ability to pay of their customers that may not be, strong enough to allow for high returns. But from an investment point of view, I think it's important to know where you stand, what you aim to do in terms of where you want to apply the capital, what is your expectation from a financial return point of view, what is the time that you require your money, and as part of your portfolio, you can have different approaches. Venture philanthropy, for example, which is an instrument of investment that doesn't expect the financial return in itself, is also an investment tool, right? That is very important for models that don't necessarily have a financially sustainable business model, but have a really, really strong impact return. So it's difficult to really define what an impact investor is, because there is a big spectrum, and there's we need to play with the different variables of financial return and impact return, and also to the time of the investment as well.
But, Rita, sorry, quickly here, just to to let our auditors know. what's the thesis? I believe it's impact across stack, or do you have the verticals you're focusing on? And what are the investment criteria for you? Like very, very quickly, like in tweets.
So I'll just focus on our fund, on our VC fund, instead of focusing on the other tools. On our fund, we are generalists. So in terms of topics, we invest in big topics, right? Health and well-being, future of work and education, sustainability on production and consumption, but all of this is quite general. We look for companies. Usually we invest in really early stage companies, those that are really trying to have an innovative approach and are on their go-to-market phase. We look for companies that have what we call the lockstep model. So their main market, what they're trying to solve, is a social problem, and their business model is completely aligned with it. So the more they sell, the more impact they are creating. And for those, for the management of these investments, we define, a metric, 1-2 impact metrics that are as important to us as investors as the financial return of our portfolio. So we, as fund managers, have the incentives aligned to make sure that our portfolio has met the expectations of impact and has created impact in the broader scheme of things. We do not necessarily measure like all the different components as part of the performance of the fund, like governance, like a B Corp, for example, would do. But we are a B Corp, so we just assume that companies have this in place. We challenge them as part of being part of the boards of these companies. But in terms of metrics, we define 1-2 that are really aligned with what they are trying to tackle, so that it's also feasible at the end of the day.
Thank you. Nuno, you and I had in private this conversation because I actually asked you this about this topic on, how do you as an impact focused company sort of see like the profitability, the interest that you give, because probably I want to say if you go and invest in a crowd lending for real estate, you might have like higher interest, right, or whatever. But I'm pretty sure that you keep your balance in a way that you can ensure sustainability and profitability of your model. So what's your view on this?
Yeah, of course, it's a hard to strike balance, especially since we're talking patience and long term. One thing that we always say is, and it's maybe our biggest frustration, is that sustainability requires long term, and society seems to be evolving exactly in the opposite direction, right? So we want everything to be immediate. We want to make a lot of money on a very short time span, and this creates, of course, several difficulties when it comes to defining the funding plans or the loan plans that companies work with when they are with GoParity. Because ideally, like Rita kind of touched, if you're looking for funding for solar panels, our goal is that your monthly installment to pay back the loan to people that have lent money to your company is smaller than the profit or savings that you are making with that panel. So this would be the ideal model, right? If you can get a loan for solar panels for 6, 7, 8, or 9 or 10 years, then it is assured that you will save more or earn more than what it will cost you to pay back your loan. But when reality strikes in, is that when we place a loan that is a 10-year loan on our platform, it is much harder to fund than if it were the same loan, but with a 5-year term. Now, as we grow, I think this is actually becoming better. Just the past month in January, we funded 2 campaigns with 10-year loans. And the reason I believe is also because of, and this relates to your question, also because of the shift of mindset in people and in investors. For example, these two projects that we funded, I'm sure that probably 2 years ago we wouldn't have been able to fund them, but they are projects that are energy communities, so shared electricity produced with solar panels on the rooftops of charities. So they basically have everything, right? Charities will have cheaper electricity. People around the charities, local community, will have cheaper electricity. And you as an investor know that you are making money. Maybe it's, of course, not as much money as you could be making by investing in real estate. Or I'm not going to say crypto anymore because now you don't know. But at least in real estate. But so I think people are already also starting to accept that it's okay not to make as much money as possible and as fast as possible, but to know that you're actually generating a higher value, something that goes well beyond economic value. I like to think that this is a bit of proof of that.
Matteo, I just want to go back to this question. I think that there is sometimes a misconstruct around we need to make a choice between profitability and sustainability or impact. And I think that that's a paradigm that is a mindset that is not necessarily valid. And there are many situations where the higher the impact, the higher the profitability. And I think it's important to stress that component, that idea. And I come to this conversation from a corporation point angle, if you want, from a consulting angle, not from an investor angle. I'm not necessarily saying, I have a bucket of money and I'm going to find the place to provide more impact. That's not my question. My question is, if you operate in the heart of a corporation, what can you do within your operating model, business model, within the organization to create some sort of impact? And I go back to kind of the guru of this discussion, Michael Porter being this manager, the guru of management for many years in strategy. And he came up with this concept of creating shared value, which is the notion and the idea that the responsibility of an organization is not to maximize shareholder value, but create stakeholder value. And this idea of society and organization playing in the same fields. So when we get to when we have organizations that manage to explore business models that create profitability while they solve a social problem, in the words of Michael Porter, you almost create an endless source of revenue. And that's kind of very much at the heart of mission of an organization. We are always looking, who is my market? What is the problem that we are going to solve? So if we find solutions that bring better benefit to the world and society and environment, then that is the biggest source of revenue. And there are endless evidence that organizations that play in that fields, that explore their own business models, in the long term, they have higher rates of return in the stock market. So that's kind of an evidence that is emerging through kind of at Harvard Business School and so on, where we have already a number of studies. So I don't think it's a dichotomy between do I need to sacrifice profitability to create sustainability or impact? Actually, the model should be how do we bring impact, and through that model we create sustainability.
Katia, I'll ask you to keep for a second your consultant hat, because the last question I wanted to ask to the three of you, and please be brief, because this discussion as usually could take much longer than the time we have. It's how do you measure impact? And the reason why I'm asking is because the fund I was venture partner for until a year ago, Bamboo Capital Partners, impact investors for early stage in Africa, we basically came up with our own way to to show and to demonstrate which impact the startups that we were investing in were giving. But how much how standardized is impact measurement, because it is a super important way, for example, for GoParity to decide whether or not I want to invest in company A versus company B. Is super important for Rita, because for the investor that invest in their fund, they want to actually show that if they're putting money in an impact initiative, is it, is the way the impact is measured on, I don't know, job creation, value creation, GDP growth, and just inventing, a few parameters. So, Katya, keep your consultant hats on.
How do you measure that? Well, I mean, Matteo, I would like to give you a formula that there are 100 formulas to measure impact. That's a reality, right? So there are, and that's kind of the problem. Somehow we have so many conventions to measure impact that becomes almost like overwhelming. At least from where do I sit? I think that in the last 5 years or so, I see far more formulas emerging that they bring a lot of credibility to the contexts. I mean, on the other hand, sometimes goes back to my days where I was a learning and development consultant, where everybody was very keen to measure the impact of learning, right? So it's kind of this, fundamental important thing. The reality is that in some contexts makes sense to spend time and money and efforts and I would say to the scenarios that you are describing around, decision-making process and so on. In some contexts, I would probably let it go because, to have a remit of assessments of your impact is important, but to stress and around those metrics, I think that sometimes becomes quite unproductive because it's almost impossible. And you are right. So when you talk about scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, for instance, it becomes almost like overwhelming to think about all the detailed things that if you produce a washing machine, what's going to the kind of going to be the emissions, but to have somehow your organization in focusing on having a broad reflection around the impact that they provide, positive and negative, I think is important, and then progress really, because I think that the world needs urgent solutions. If you stress a lot about measure in how, to what extent we are being good Samaritans or not, I think that's not necessarily kind of what we are trying to achieve.
So at Maze, because we work mainly with the early stage companies, we are in the business of seeding more than measuring, right? So that's why the concept that we tend to use the most is the management of impact. Also because impact should be managed and not just measured. It is a work in progress. Sometimes metrics that we set up in the beginning are not the ones that are the most appropriate along the journey of a company. So this idea of, and just like Katya was saying, like looking at it, being critical about the positive and negative impact that you are creating intendedly or unintendedly is really, really important. And in order to do that, we tend to use one methodology, which is, it's not even a methodology, it's just a framework, to be honest, that is inspired by many methodologies, is the IMP framework, the Impact Management Projects framework. And basically what we do with it is we apply this framework to all the projects, be it startups, other kinds of projects, as I said, along the spectrum. And we apply this methodology to help us tell the narrative on why, for us, this is an impact project, and to explain what is the impact that is being created and why we've decided to do so. Once again, taking as a consideration that impact is very subjective, there's not a consensus on it, so it's our way and our rationale. And this framework basically is structured in 5 dimensions that help us explain that and help us manage it along the way, which is the what. So what are the outcomes that we are trying to reach with this solution? What is, the actual impacts, the actual positive change, and some of the negative ones that is happening? Who is being affected by it, both socially, so vulnerable groups, the beneficiaries, and environmentally, the planet? How much of a change are we creating with the solution, with this initiative? Depth, at scale, how lasting is it? Then we look at the contribution of the solution. So if nothing was happening, what would happen, right? To understand what are we actually adding to the market. And finally, a component that I find really interesting, which is the risk mapping. What are the impact risks that we are faced in the implementation of this? We are facing in the implementation of this solution. And by looking at the risks is also something that will make us feel aware of all the different things that should be managing in what concerns the impact, more than, again, measuring a specific milestone, which we do, but we just do more than that. So I would say that this is a framework that can be applied in any context, even in a corporate context, like Katya's startup, investor, even the public sector with the solutions that they have implemented. So this is how we feel comfortable today navigating in this level of uncertainty and some confusion that sometimes exists, which is this impact measurement conversations.
No.
So we of course this is key for us because our whole business model depends on this, and our business long-term existence also depends on user trust and user confidence, right? So if we did do the mistake of funding a project that for some reason creates more harm than the good it generates, we would have huge backlash for sure. Actually, we have done projects that we did not think would create such a backlash, and then we are always quite surprised by how keen people are on, in the end, helping us improve and be more demanding ourselves. So, for example, I can tell you the story. We funded solar panels so we have no-go areas, right, to start with. So if you're an animal farm and you don't have certificates of animal well-being, animals being spending the number of hours in open air, etc., we won't fund you, even if the money is only being used for solar panels. Because in the end, our first criteria is, where is the money being used? Solar panels, okay. Where are they going to be placed on? Hen farm. Okay, is it an open air hen farm? Do they have animal well-being certificates, whatever? They do? Okay, then we can fund it. They don't? We can't. This has happened, and we have rejected projects. We did one solar panels in Brazil, rooftop of a shopping center. In principle, there shouldn't be anything too wrong. We got maybe 4 or 5 people complaining, how can you fund solar panels in a shopping center if you know that it's a consumerism temple below those panels? So this is the level of attention or devotion people pay to knowing that their money is being used for good. Apart from all, of course, the financial due diligence, we do the impact due diligence. That's what we call it. So it first goes through this filter, and then sustainable development goals. Is it actively contributing to any of the sustainable development goals? If it is, then how do we quantify impact? And that's where we use a mix. Of course, in the end, we had to generate our own framework because there isn't, as Katya mentioned, there isn't a one-size-fits-all, and there's a lot of frameworks all over. So the most important one that we used, I think it's the IRIS by the Global Impact Investment Network. But we did a lot that is just based on research, and quite a lot is based on just pure scientific research papers or something. So, for example, one thing that we try to do is to convert metrics, so measures, into metrics that people can actually understand. So when we say that the project will avoid the emission of 22 kilograms of CO2 per year, nobody knows exactly what that means and what impact that has. When we convert it to, that's the equivalent to planting one oak tree, for that year, or that's how much an oak tree would absorb in 1 year, then it becomes something that is more tangible and understandable. And to be able to do this, we also know that we say this because this is proven by this is estimated by this study, and it is officially used by the European Environmental Agency. So this is the sort of way that we work. And then there are projects that are what we call in the gray area. For example, production line in a shoe factory, and they want to buy a new machine, one that is more efficient. So it will use less electricity, probably generate less leather waste or whatever textile waste it generates. But is it a good thing? I mean, is it more impactful? Is it better to buy a new one than to keep using the old one until it just dies out? And what we do when we come to that point is that we have an impact officer and inside GoParity. And she's the one, so it's not an executive committee decision, it's an impact officer decision. So it goes back, her name is Yara, and it goes back to Yara, and Yara is the person that does the analysis. And if it does fill the criteria that it seems to generate more positive outcome than the harm it does to throw away the other machine, maybe because the other one is obsolete or something like that, or can't be repaired or whatever, then we can fund that project. Otherwise, we can't.
There is a whole a new chapter that we don't have the time to talk about now, but you could even think of, if a shoe factory needs a machine and that machine will replace the work of 50 people because it will automatize, it's not really a gray area. It's actually a very super interesting and delicate debate to have. Guys, thank you very much for this episode. I'm very grateful. I enjoyed it a lot. Let's wrap up with one line. How guys can find you? So typically, Rita, you could give the website of your fund, Katia, the website of the event and conference that shows the Social Good Summit, which I'll let you say it because I'm not sure I remember it right. And Nuno, the GoParity website. Rita, go.
So maze-impact.com, or you can reach me on LinkedIn, the easiest as well.
Great. Katia.
Just found me in Bronte Beach having a swim in the morning. I'm kidding. Katia, it's Social Good Summit AU, or by LinkedIn, Katia TV. It's where you find me.
Thank you. Nuno.
Yeah, you can just go to GoParity.com or also get in touch via LinkedIn.
Great. Guys, thanks a lot. That was a great episode. Thank you very much, Rita, Katia, and Nuno. And that is a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.